Hello, good morning, and it's thoughts and updates once again. Me back in the back garden. The reason I'm back in the back garden is it's been a long week and one where I've been out in the Fringe a lot, so catching up on some heavy Zeds, but also it's absolutely Baltic and raining down here. Something which has happened a lot during the course of the last few weeks has been heavy rain and heavy weather in Scotland and indeed down in England, and it's led to a lot of flooding. Not tsunami like in other parts of the world, but it has caused a lot of major disruption, particularly down in Ayrshire, near where I come from, and in Kilmarnock in particular, where it's been pretty bad. Flood defences are something that have been invested in over a period of time, but they don't seem to be yet good enough in order to maintain the type of service that we should be used to. And talking about service, what is a fillet? And why is it in a McDonald's? I have spent a lot of time in my life in McDonald's because I've got kids, but also I'm quite partial to an odd McDonald's now and again. And over the last wee while, I have noticed that when I have gone in to order a specific thing, I have been told that my fillet is going to be a little while, and if I want to sit at the side or I want to move my car over to wherever it is, then they will come to me with their fillet. What is a fillet? It's a fillet of fish. It's McDonald's. I've no rocked up to Marco Pierre White's drive-through in order to ask in for un fillet de poisson, s'il vous plaît. I've asked for a fillet of flipping fish. Why? It's McDonald's, for God's sake. I particularly found this difficult when I was over at the Fringe and I was coming out looking for something to eat at a very, very dark, dismal midnight time. And I've noticed in my Facebook feed I've got a memory from 2 years ago where I was at the Fringe, and that would have been a Thursday or a Friday. And I came out of one of the venues and the rain was like stair rods. So 2 years on, it's not quite much different. It's been an interesting year for the Fringe. I'm going back up in West, it'll be my last day there, and there are traditions that I have for being at the Fringe towards the end of it. I'm looking to my last show, and I know which one it is now, and I'm also looking for the kebab at the end of it. It is just a sleazy last nod to my past, I suppose, when I was drinking, that late at night you would go for a kebab, and I'm not out late at night. So I'm not going to remove that from my traditions at all, and I already know where I'm going to go in order to indulge my hunger on that last night. And then removal is something that's been an issue for us at work. There have been a number of children who've been moved on, whether it has been for good or bad reasons, and one of the things that I've just got is one young child who is going to be moved into a local authority home, obviously because it's cheaper. He has come to us because he does not have a lot of English, and therefore a lot of the things that have happened over the recent past in terms of child labour being brought into this country illegally and so on, the reality, the headlines aside, the bodies washed up on the beach of a few years ago and people feeling quite sympathetic towards those who are seeking political asylum or attempting to get away from a war zone. One of the realities is, and we've had it before, is that these children arrive and they're in a foreign land and they have no English and they have got nothing. And people like ourselves work very hard with them, and they're just a fantastic joy to have, and then at some point they are plucked from our care. It's because we're expensive in comparison to put them in a local authority home. But the English lessons have to continue. We have to keep maintaining that level of support through that communication, through that relationship. These children and young people grow into something, and it's certainly not the same, but it's something similar. But the Pakistani Scot, Kash Farooq, who last night won the Lonsdale belt outright in the British bantamweight fight in the first round, knocked the guy to the floor in the first round with a tremendous body shot. But you're not going to see a lot about him in mainstream media. You're not going to see a lot about him actually, about a lot of boxing news websites, because he's very much under the radar, and he has done what Lewis Ritson did. But Kash Farooq is better than Lewis Ritson, but he will not get the European title fight that he deserves. And one of the things that's been suggested is that he goes and he fights Lee McGregor. Lee McGregor is the mandatory British title challenger, who's also a Scot. So you'll get an all-Scottish British title fight, and if the Commonwealth title is up as well. Now, I'd get no doubt that Kash Farooq will beat Lee McGregor. I saw McGregor fight Scott Allen, and Scott Allen was stopped prematurely. I saw Scott Allen fight Kash Farooq not once but twice, and Farooq beat him, knocked him clean to the floor and won, and I think also stopped him in the second one. And I like Scott, and I think Scott's a fantastic fighter. So as a benchmark, Farooq is miles ahead of McGregor. But that fight is something I think that hinders both their careers, and I think further down the line it would be better. But one of the things that I've noticed, particularly of those who are very hyped, like your Ritsons, your Cheesemans and so on, is that they get to a certain level and they falter and they fail. Now, Ritson is rebuilding his career. Cheeseman is beginning to rebuild his career. They're both exciting fighters, as indeed is Kash Farooq. The issue here is the development of the fighter towards what they could achieve. Now, one of the theories behind all of that is the desire not to lose your own, not to be defeated, and this obsession that some people have of never ever losing a fight, which you should, every time you get in a ring as a boxer, you're potentially going to lose a fight. You're up against a guy who's either at the level that you're at, the level above. If you're in against a guy who's a level below, there's a reason for that. It's a comeback fight, it's a warm-up, it's a tune-up, it's a whatever it is. But you don't spend your time wasting your time unless your record is being padded and you're being over-promoted. And there is an argument that both Ritson and Cheeseman were both that. Farooq, real deal, really is. Everybody says so. Gary Jacobs, Alec Arthur, and the BBC broadcast it last night. The fantastic thing about it was that they brought a commentator up from England who was a boxing commentator, and it made such a difference. And although it was only 2 minutes 50 odd seconds of a fight, but the difference between hearing somebody who has got a knowledge background and understands the fight game rather than somebody who's a sports commentator who's just been given the gig was relatively obvious. So let's hope, I hope, that the next thing for Kash Farooq is to progress onto European, if not international level. During the week also, Tim Tszyu, son of Costa Tszyu, who fought Ricky Hatton and gave Hatton probably his best win of his career, won. And he's another guy he's a welterweight. I think that he probably, according to all other reports, the apple has not fallen far from the tree, and Costa Tszyu was a massive, massive fighter of his time, and Hatton's win sent shockwaves around the world. And Tim Tszyu should be up there fighting for international titles as well. And on Wednesday he took a non-title fight, a keep busy fight, and apparently was outstanding. But it's been very, very quiet because it's that season. It's the season where B samples and I'm not coming to the UK and I'm not going to Saudi Arabia hits headlines because there's nothing else to report. What has been reported this week is very disturbing, and there's two things that really have disturbed me. And whilst everybody goes on about various things that are very, very important to them, there are probably three things in terms of democracy that are massive. One, Kashmir. I tutor a wee girl, she's coming up 16. She is looking to do a persuasive essay, and one of the things that we talked about was Kashmir, because she's a Pakistani boy, a Pakistani Scot. And in Kashmir, the Indian government has removed special status from that province. Kashmir is divided between India and Pakistan, both claim it. And special status was granted because the Kashmiris want neither. In many places of Kashmir, they see themselves as an independent state. Internet has been cut off, all communication has been cut off, and it has meant that what the Indian government is able to do is they're able to do whatever they want, and that's a problem. Also, round Hong Kong, the Chinese government have amassed tanks ready to go and sort out the problem of the rule of law, which similarly is a problem. The Hong Kong people have been protesting, and I heard an interview this week where one of the protesters, the leaders of the protest, have been talked to about how perhaps they're going to run out of steam. Well, if there's anything that actually does suggest that the difference 30 years after Tiananmen Square is an anniversary that happened on Friday, which was Friday the 16th of August. And on the 16th of August, 1719, 60,000 people gathered in St Petersfield. It was 1819. Gathered in St Petersfield near Manchester. 60,000 people demanding reform. Now, we've had a lot of commemorations over the last 3 or 4 years to do with World War I, which was the preservation of our way of life. We couldn't claim as the preservation of democracy purely because women didn't have the vote. So universal suffrage was not something that we could celebrate as part of that. This, however, was something which led to a number of things. It led 30 years later to the 1848 movement in the United Kingdom that involved the Charterists, which were 10 demands for changes in the democracy of the United Kingdom, most of which have taken place, one of which didn't, which was annual parliaments, although Boris Johnson and Theresa May and David Cameron seem to be absolutely keen on that. What it also led to 100 years ago was the founding of the Manchester Guardian, a reformist newspaper, which is of course now the Guardian. Now, what happened on that day, some 60,000 people turned up in order to hear Henry Orator Hunt, and he was not a very likeable guy. He was an arrogant person, and his demands for some form of democratisation of the process of politics within the United Kingdom was something that was seen by the authorities as being highly dangerous. The authorities in Manchester panicked and sent in the military. 18 people died. Many, many, many more ended up injured. There was the sights of the British Army with sabres drawn, scything down people who were holding up their arms in horror and protest. About 150 different events are being held to mark that event. It was in St Petersfield. It was called the Peterloo Massacre very soon after because, of course, the Waterloo fight between the British and the French, which the British had won, had only been 4 years earlier. So it was fresh in people's memories, and it was easy to take that and transpose it into the symbol of homegrown protest. I do hope that in Kashmir and in Hong Kong there is some kind of peaceful solution. Having listened to those who are close to the Chinese government and indeed those close to Prime Minister Modi, I am not sure that that's going to be the case. And Imran Khan, as the Prime Minister of Pakistan, has said he is going to teach India a lesson. India and Pakistan are both nuclear countries. It is not a time to be particularly internationally happy. What would you take for someone who was a massively well-known diplomat who had the ability to take two sides and put them together, not bang heads, but be diplomatic enough, who would sit in the White House? And what we got, or sit in Westminster, and what we got? Troubling times, not in the United Kingdom, but internationally. Also this week, writing. I've been doing a lot of writing. One of the things that we all have is, well, I've got an ego like everybody else. And because I go around lots of the places in the Fringe, one of the things that I get back to is other venues, and I can see my quotes being put on. I've been taking a wee bit of photograph here and there because we've all got egos. But it's also quite nice because these are companies and performances that are not getting the Scotsman and the Times and the Guardian, all the bigs, the Stage and the British Theatre Guide all in to see them. So it's support for them. I also got to write this week for Ringside Report about Lottie Mwale, a Zambian fighter who was a national hero, never became a world champion, but he fought twice for a world title. An interesting fighter. He knocked Tony Simpson out in the first round, who was a British prospect early in both their careers in the United Kingdom. And Mwale based himself in London, so it was a good write. Also for their advertiser, I wrote this week about Auchinleck. There has been an announcement that Scottish Opera are going to be performing a piece with under the helm of Mary McCluskey, a mate of mine who used to be the artistic director of Scottish Youth Theatre, and Mary has written, devised, put together a piece that looks at Mozart and Burns. and that will go to Auchinleck Academy. And the same at the National Theatre Scotland went to the Auchinleck Academy to do something called Light Flying, which looked at children's, young people's mental health. So exciting times, I suppose, in Auchinleck. And I was actually in Auchinleck Academy not that long ago, last week, for a post-admission review for one of the young people. So very much in my mind Auchinleck, very much in my mind Kilmarnock, because of the water. The water leads me to Waterloo. Waterloo leads me to Peterloo, and I'm going to finish with the words of that Jeremy Corbyn used at the Glastonbury Festival in 2017, but actually comes from Percy Shelley's visionary poem, The Mask of Anarchy. He wrote it in September 1819 when he was in Italy, and it entreats non-violent resistance, and it was used as inspiration by none other than Mahatma Gandhi, and it was never printed until after Shelley died, because people were concerned that it would provoke and promote unrest within the populace. And it calls on the people to rise like lions after slumber in unvanquishable number. And it ends with that line, which is, "Ye are many, they are few." And on that, I'll see you next week. Oh, subscribe to my YouTube channel, because this is where it's going to be from now on. Bye for now.